I don't know intention side, because then, yeah, we just went on like a big class discussion, like the difference between cited and the like. I don't.
Okay, so then let's finish where we left off. So we are on page 2. Mitzvahs Ashbasas Chametz Achilas Matzah. We're the end of Ois Aleph. Where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines from the end of Ois Aleph. The last word on the line is Vizu. The last word on the line. So here he's explaining when we say that Matzah gives us Amunah, what does it mean by Amunah, and what is it that we're saying specifically we're gaining from eating Matzah? So he said that the simple way of explaining Amunah, the way most people interpret it, means to believe that Hashem is there, that He's creating the world. And then Tzemach explains that's not the real Indian of Amunah, because that is something which we can see, like we can see the neshama through the guf. So what is Amunah? Amunah is to believe in something higher than that Hashem is beyond what we see through creation is really only Mamar kalamim. That's the lower level. But there's Seva kalamim, which is where Hashem creates the world yesh mi'ayin every second. And the difference is when you talk about the world, how it relates to Mamar kalamim, that's called bittul hayesh. Because the Mamar kalamim, that light doesn't create the world. That's the light that gives life to it, that gives the details. But Seva kalamim is responsible for the very existence. Without that, it doesn't even begin to exist. So therefore, the Gabe, that higher level, the world is totally considered that it has no sort of independent entity whatsoever. And that's why we say, Hashem Ulakim Ein Oid. We can't even refer to the world as Oid. Oid would mean like the guf. The guf is something that has its own identity, but the identity of the guf is secondary, and it's sort of buckled to the neshama. With the world, it doesn't even have its own identity, because the mere fact that it exists is only because of Hashem. Again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We went through that in the first Mamar. It means it is a definite creation of Hashem, but its identity is not its own identity the way we perceive it, but it's Hashem. So now let's start with Vizu. Vizu Amunah Nisyach Dali Yisrael. This is the Amunah that's unique for Yidden Levad. Ki Umas Ha'olam, the nations of the world, even those that believe in Hashem, Korle Lekod Lekaya. This term we had in the other Mamar. Here we have it again. We have it in many Maimarim. Just to see where it comes from, the source for this is actually in Gemara. If you look in the booklet, it's page 17. So you can see the source. Plus, this is the middle of a discussion, but nevertheless, we'll just focus on that paragraph that's underlined on page 17. So Rav said to Shimi, a great Torah scholar like you should be asking me such a question. I never meant to say that the Gentiles who are beyond the Jewish settlement do not recognize Hashem. The Korle Lekod Lekaya, rather I meant they recognize Hashem, but they call him the God of all the gods. So basically, they recognize that Hashem is the creator, And they recognize that Hashem is really the one in charge of everything. But they believe that Hashem created other forces, that these forces have some sort of independent power. This means Hashem is the first entity and the first power, the real true source. All other forces that exist in the universe, that exist in creation, which are limited, they all come from Hashem. But nevertheless, nevertheless, they give significance to the world and to these forces. They look at the world and they look at all these other forces, whether it be the force of nature, the constellations, the sun, the moon, and anything in the world that causes things to happen, or the forces of klipa that are in the spiritual realm. All these things, they have an identity, but Hashem is the super God, so to speak. He's above them. But they do have an identity, and they're bottled to Hashem, like the guf is bottled to the neshama. That's the way you look at it. But the truth is that Hashem, is so much higher and more exalted than that. He let us know the truth that Hashem echad, Hashem is one, ve'ein oid mamish, and there's nothing else that truly exists. Ki kol ha'olam ayim ve'efes mamish. The whole world is ayim ve'efes, meaning again it doesn't have its own independent identity. Its true identity is Hashem, being that Hashem creates it every second, and without that second, if Hashem would stop for a second, creating the part of the world, that detail or that creation would no longer exist. So its true identity is Hashem. Doesn't have any identity of its own, not even one iota of an identity. Like a guf and neshama, and we understand that it's not like the guf and the neshama. Hashem is so much higher, so much greater. So basically, they see the greatness of Hashem through the universe. So even people that see Hashem and see how great He is and believe in Hashem, and the more they study nature and the more they see what goes on in the world, the more they're amazed and the more they're excited about Hashem's greatness, but still they're seeing Hashem's greatness through creation. And Hashem is infinitely more than what He invested in creation. What He invested in creation is just ha'ara, that's mamala kolam. And in essence, Hashem Himself is infinite beyond creation, so save kolam. The place which is considered in Chassidus the source to explain Sefer Kolam and Mamala Kolam, these two things, is in Tanya chapter 48. Of course, anything in Tanya is much more brief, though you'll find it in other Maimarim, but that's the source. And other Maimarim that talk about Sefer Kolam and Mamala Kolam will always make reference to this chapter in Tanya. And what Hashem does invest into the world, what aspect of Hashem is mislabish, clothes itself in creation, it's only almost like a reflection. You know, in Chassidus, we want to bring out that there's something that comes from me, but it really hardly has any substance. They use the word ha'ara. Ha'ara means a reflection, which means just like if I stand in front of a mirror, obviously there's something of me that's sort of being reflected in the mirror. But that something is insignificant, meaning it doesn't, there's certain things that a person expresses of himself that makes you tired, that makes you weak because you're exerting energy. So if I lift something that weighs 100 pounds, of course, it's very hard. If I lift something weighing 1 pound, it doesn't really make me tired. But I can't say that I'm not exerting any energy, because if 1 pound would be zero energy, then 100 pounds would also be zero. Because 100 times zero is zero. So that means that when I lift something like 1 pound, I have to be using a little bit of my energy. However, ha'ara means that when I'm standing in front of a mirror, you can stand in front of a mirror for 1,000 years, you won't get exhausted. You'll get exhausted from standing so long, but you won't get exhausted from the fact that your reflection is being reflected for 1,000 years. Because whatever's being reflected is like insignificant to who you are. What Hashem invested in creation is a ha'ara. So this is something that doesn't drain me, it doesn't exhaust me, it doesn't take anything away from me. It's so external, it's so insignificant. Nothing changes in me because I'm standing in front of a mirror and my reflection is seen in the mirror. So in a sense, the same with Hashem, that the energy that Hashem invests in creation, and this is responsible for the whole universe, the sun and the moon and the constellation and the stars and humans and animals and everything that's happening. But the energy that Hashem invested in that is like the ha'ara of Hashem himself. And that's what we call Mamar Kalamim. That's Hashem's speech. Mebchinas dibur, v'nikra Mamar Kalamim. And to understand it better, I am b'likuti Yamar and Chelik Beis. One should study what it says in Tanya, the second volume of Tanya, which is called Shari Yichud Amunah. Biyuzeh, to explain this, the Karav and the Seichel, to bring it closer to understanding, and should really be able to comprehend it and understand it and really digest it intellectually. The Darke Hariyah v'Ameifis, using examples, things that we could see that will help us understand, like Mashalim of Gashmizik things with the sun and the sunlight, which will help us understand it in a proper way. You understand everything I just said? Yeah, okay, wasn't that complicated? Okay, so before we go to Bays, let's take out this workbook and go over the questions of Aleph. Only 4 questions. I don't think we have terms here, do we? Let's assume. We do? Okay, we have terms. It's just not broken up to chapters, but I'll tell you as far as we go. Okay, you have? Yeah, okay. What?
I just said the terms are on page 4.
Yeah, so let's do page 38b first, the first one. So the first question is, why is matzah called Michla B'Hemnusa, and it's called food of faith? What's the source that matzah should be called food of faith? The Zohar. And what did the Zohar say? Do you remember the mashal? Right.
It's not just like, oh, to remember it.
It actually creates it, it produces it, right? I didn't put that into the questions. Interesting. The mashal was a mashal of a king. What? Same, the same. Yeah, except that has a cover, doesn't have a cover. Oh, that's after the tzava. Okay. Here I have more. 1, 2. Sorry. That's what happens when you make it yellow. Anybody else? Yeah, okay. The mashal was of a king that he had a son, a prince, who got very sick. And the doctor said you have to stop eating all foods because you're so sick. And therefore you have to eat only one specific food. And you have to eat it for a week. And after eating this specific food for 1 week, you'll be healed. And once you're healed, now you can eat whatever you want. So Yidden were in Mitzrayim, and they became sick spiritually. In what way? That they were lacking Amunah. That's what the Zohar says. Obviously, Egypt was full of idol worship, and being that they were there for so many hundreds of years, so they became like the Egyptians. They didn't have proper Amunah in Hashem. So Hashem said, okay, stop eating all other foods, eat just matzah. can't eat any bread, any chametz, eat matzah for 7 days. And once you eat the matzah for 7 days, after that, you can go ahead and eat whatever you want. And what is the matzah? That's the food that gives us emunah. So this is the source of this term, michla de behemnusa, food of faith. It comes from the Zohar, that matzah gives us faith. But if you don't mind, Lee, I didn't put into the question, but just explain what you said. One of the questions should have been, what is the difference between the way we understand mitzvahs, and specifically this mitzvah, according to Nigla, according to the revealed part of Torah, or the way we understand it according to Chassidus?
So you saying that we remember what happened in time, but according to Chassidus, when we read the Matzah, we remember after the creating something like that.
Right. So what he explains here is about matzah, but it's also a general thing. That the difference between we understand mitzvahs in general and the way we understand the significance of mitzvahs when we study Chassidus is that in general, mitzvahs are looked upon like symbols. They remind us of certain things. So matzah reminds us that we went out of Egypt. It reminds us that Hashem performs miracles, and He is the one who is above nature. And the same with anything else. Mezuzah reminds us that Hashem's presence is in this house. Or tzitzis reminds a man that there are 613 commandments. And making Kiddush on Shabbat reminds us that Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Every mitzvah is a reminder of something. So it would be like having a red ribbon on your finger and reminds you of something that you don't want to forget. It's something external and reminds us. According to Chassidus, it's much deeper than that. The matzah contains in it a tremendous spiritual power that when I eat the matzah, it actually helps develop emunah in my heart, in my mind. Or the same with the mitzvah, tefillin, or tzitzis, or mezuzah. Mitzvahs have in it a certain spiritual component, which that helps a person rise to certain spiritual levels. And each mitzvah helps us in a different area. So matzah has in it a certain power that helps us with emunah. And that was the question in the Mamar. What is it about matzah? How does it give us emunah? Question number 2 was, why is true emunah not that Hashem creates the world? Why couldn't that be considered true emunah? So he says that anyone who looks at the universe, of course, looking at the universe logically and objectively, can actually see that there's an existing entity that's giving life to the world. Otherwise, how's all this happening? And of course, the mashal with that would be like the neshama and the guf. Nobody would say you need a emunah to believe that there's a soul behind the body. The body is a physical object. The body is no less physical than meat that's on the table or anything else that's physical. And yet it's full of life. There's intellect, there's emotion, there's walking, there's talking, there's doing all these things. Clearly there's a living force in the body that's vitalizing the body. We're not talking about what it looks like, how it looks like, just that it exists. So that's not true emunah. So number 3, what is true emunah? Right. So the true emunah is that to believe that, not that, right. But first of all, to believe that Hashem is infinitely more than what we see in creation. When we look at creation, we can see how infinite Hashem is, how incredible Hashem is, and how brilliant Hashem is. All the scientists in the world and all the science that we discover in the world will all agree that we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more wisdom to creation that's beyond our comprehension, with our computers, with everything. A friend of mine put into a question into artificial intelligence. Could scientists create a mosquito? So the answer came back that all the sciences in the world will get together, they still won't be able to create a mosquito. So basically, you look at the world and you see Hashem's infinite wisdom. So Amunah means to believe that Hashem is infinitely greater than all that we see through creation, because Hashem himself is beyond creation. And what's in creation is just a ha'ara. That's the main point. And therefore, the world is really totally buttoned for Hashem, because it exists only because of him. Do the other nations of the world have the capacity for this true Amunah? They have a mitzvah to believe in Hashem, but they don't really have the capacity to believe to this degree. That's something which is given to you. So now let's skip over to page 42. Here we have the Hasidic terms that come out of the Mamar. So the ones that come out of this Ois, chapter 1, is we go up until number we have quite a few.
Could we say that?
Till 20. What?
Could we say that Emunah means that from the leads in this transcendental parts?
What do you mean by that?
Transcendental part is the part that we cannot see.
Yes, that's the part that we cannot see or comprehend through creation. Understanding that what Hashem created is an amazing creation. It's beyond our mind's comprehension, but it's really nothing compared to Hashem, who Hashem really is in himself. Right. Okay, so let's go through some of the terms. Number one is what we just said on page 42. Michla de means food of faith. Number two, I didn't mention it in the class, but matzah has another name. It's called Michla dasvasa, food of healing. But it's based on the same Zohar, because the Zohar says that the matzah is the mashal like a child that's sick and it heals you. In fact, the Rebbe often, when people would come to the Rebbe for bracha, for matzah, for bracha, for healing someone who was sick, one of the things the Rebbe would give a piece of matzah and say that this is food of healing.
Why? Because what happened in Egypt?
The Zohar says that just like matzah has in it the power to give emunah, spiritual emunah, it has the power to heal a person physically. It has a ruchnistic power to make a person who's sick become healthy. I told you once, just think of it as a big pill. You can't swallow it in one shot. It's a big pill. It's round and big, and you eat it. And how does this little green pill make me healthy? There's something in it that makes me healthy, right? Gets rid of the bacteria, gets rid of the germs. So this is a matzah that has a spiritual power in it, that by eating it, a person who is, God forbid, sick could become healthy. Number three, Eraisa Sosim Vigalia. It's in the Mamar. Maybe when we learned that I didn't sort of focus on it. Eraisa means what? The Torah. Sosim Vigalia means there's hidden and there's revealed. In the Torah, there's the hidden meaning and there's a revealed meaning. The revealed meaning is more what we can see in Pshat, the simple understanding. Sosim is the hidden understanding. So the simple understanding is you eat matzah as a reminder, to remind us that we went out of Mitzrayim. Like a red ribbon will remind me of something. The deeper meaning is not just a reminder, like you explained, that actually contains in it a spiritual power that gives it emunah. So there's two other words that are used, mean the same thing. Number 4, number 5. Nigla means what's revealed, and nister is what's hidden. When people say nigla, they're usually referring to Chumash, Rashi, Mefarshim, Gemara, and Mishnah, Halacha. That's all nigla. And nister would be Chassidus or Kabbalah, anything that's more mystical and spiritual. Number 6. We also have this in the Mamar. Kama panim lepanim ad en kates v'tachlis. That means there are many layers of depths to no end. It's not just there's external understanding and a deeper understanding. But there's deeper than deep, and there's deeper than deeper than deep, and deeper than deeper than deep, and there are layers and layers and layers of depth of understanding. Remember, we learned in the Mamar that Shlomo HaMelech, when he taught Torah, he needed 300 mashalim, which means there were 300 layers of depth to what he was teaching. And you had to bring it down all these 300 levels. So you understand something, then you understand what it means on a deeper level, then you can go deeper and deeper, and basically there's no end because it's Hashem's Torah, and Hashem is infinite. When he was talking about how you look at the world and you can see Hashem through creation, he mentioned a few things. Number one was 7. Koyach Tzemach ba'aretz. What's that?
Give life to all.
Hmm?
The strength that gives life to all.
Keep going. Look again. What? Tzemach is a plant, but what is the phrase mean? Very common. It's good to know this because it's very common. Koyach Tzemach means the power to produce things that grow. According to Chassidus, when you plant a seed in the ground, the power to create something new, to grow, is in the earth. The function of the seed is to trigger that power. And depending on what seed you put in, that's what's going to grow. But the power to create something new that wasn't here before, a new tree, a new plant, a flower, or anything else, it's just a new existence. It came out of the ground. That power is in the earth. Number 8,
Give life stars and comfort.
what's the word tenua mean?
More.
Movement. The fact that you look at the stars, the constellations, the things that are in orbit, things are moving around, they're doing hakafas the whole day, going in circles. What's moving them? That movement is again where you see there's a higher force that's causing all this to happen. And then connected to this is number 9. Koyach hapoel shebenifel. What does that mean?
Power of the creator.
Right. The power of the creator is invested in creation. When a person creates something, even if an artist creates a picture, or a singer creates a song, or a carpenter creates a table, his energy is invested in what he created. And there's a way of looking at what the person created that through that you can get to know things about the person because his energy is invested into it.
But we're saying only Hashem is like aura is like
Invested, right. But Hashem himself, his essence, is way, way beyond what he created. Number 10, Divar Hashem B'ruach Piv.
The words of Hashem and the breath of his mouth.
In reference to what is that always used?
Like
Creation, right. The pasuk says, "B'dvar Hashem shamayim nasu b'ruach piv kol tzva'on." It's a pasuk in Tehillim. The world was created with the words of Hashem, and all the hosts of the heaven were created with His breath, which basically means Hashem's speech and the 10 utterances. That's what you were learning about yesterday with Rabbi Dubov. So which is speech? Mamar kalam or Seir kalam? Mamar kalam, right. Okay, let's go to page 43. So that's number 12. Bottle, okay, this is the word which we've done this a lot. Atzmius hanefesh, the essence of the soul, we've done that a lot. Number 14. Ein melech b'lo am. What does that mean?
Nothing without nature.
How does it relate to the Mamar that the world is created from Malchus?
Malchus is like interaction with something else, it's like giving, so Hashem has to activate energy.
Right. So one of the reasons that are explained why Hashem created the world, because Hashem has in him the attribute of Malchus, kingdom. There can't be a king without a nation. So Hashem wanted to manifest his power of kingdom. That's why he created the world. So in a sense, the source of creation is the sphere of Malchus. And in Kabbalah, Malchus is actually speech. And Malchus is the lowest of the 10 spheres. So that's Ahara, Hashem himself, is 9 spheres higher than that. Okay, let's go. Let's. We have a few more, but these are things we just learned, so we don't have to really go it over again. I'd like to start at least base. So we're moving. There's movements in the orbits. Okay. Base. This is the mitzvah that Hashem gave us. The mitzvah to eat matzah, shenitstavu b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim. That Yidden were commanded to do while they were in Mitzrayim. The Mitzrayim, Heimachusre Amuna Hanal. Mitzrayim is a place where they were lacking this Amunah. In fact, it's interesting when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Paro and said, "Let the Yidden, Hashem told me to tell you that you have to let the Jews go out of Egypt." So what did Paro say? Lo Yadaiti Es Havaya. I don't know this God that you're talking about. I never heard of him. The Medrash gives a very interesting mashal that Paro took his book, he had a whole book of all the gods. And he started going through page by page. And he said, "I'm sorry, I don't find your God anywhere in my books." So the Medrash gives a very cute mashal. It's like somebody's looking for a Kohen. He's trying to find a person, and the person is a Kohen. Where's he searching for him? He's searching for him in a cemetery. The one place you won't find a Kohen is in a cemetery. He's not allowed to go to a cemetery. He's not allowed to be Tamid. So where's Paro looking for Hashem? In his book of cemetery, basically. It's all the gods that are not real. That's the mashal of the Medrash. But Chassidus goes a little bit deeper. If you look at the Chumash, it says, Lo Yadaiti Es Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Which means, in a sense, Paro is saying, the name Elokim I could relate to. Elokim is the name of Hashem that relates to creation. Elokim is the name of Hashem that's the source of nature. That I can recognize. But Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's the name of Hashem that's above nature, that's supernatural and miraculous, and something which is beyond creation. That I don't recognize. So Yidden in Mitzrayim were lacking this Amunah in Hashem as he is infinitely greater and above nature. In order to take the Jews out of this, that they should no longer be lacking this Amunah, and Hashem wanted to bring us that we should have Amunah, the higher level of Amunah, to believe in Hashem as he is beyond creation. Why they are Matzah, that's accomplished through Matzah. Matzah is considered food of Amunah. Shabob al Yodai, and through eating the Matzah, Yagiyu l'tikva b'libaisam Amunazu. That will plant in our minds this Amunah of Hashem. So how is it the physical Matzah has an effect on us that we have Amunah? The Inyan is Yuvan up here, Mamar Azal. Says in Gemara, Ein Hatinek Yedeya Likris Abam Ima. An infant or a baby doesn't really begin to call his parents and saying Abba or Ima. Ad Sheyitim Tam Dagan. It only starts once he starts eating grain. The first few months of a child's life, he's only nursing from his mother, but he's not eating dagan, which is grain. Once he starts eating grain, that's when he's able to say Abba and Ima. In a sense, we're the same thing. When we're out of Mitzrayim, we were infants. So once we started to eat matzah, which is the grain, now we can say Abba and Ima. We recognize Hashem. So now he's going to use this to understand something more deeper about Amunah. Inyan Kriyose Abba V'Ima. What is this inyan that a child can call out their father or their mother? Achati Mosei Tam Dogan. When a child does call their father or their mother and recognizes their father and their mother after they're eating dogan, grain, Eina Yediyah V'Asoga Amitis. They don't really understand what they're saying. Mahu Ovid. They don't understand what does it mean. This is my father. Shehu Hamelidim. This is the person that brought him into the world. All the other details about his father and his mother, and she's the one that carried him as a baby, and this is the one that is the one that brought them in, and he owes them his whole existence. All these things, a little baby has no concept. He doesn't understand like what it says in Tanya, that the child that's born, the source is from the brain of the father, or to understand Shativi Rachme Adalaben, that a father, and of course a mother, has a feeling for a child, the kind of a feeling that a parent has for a child. The child has no concept how parents have a special feeling for a child that nobody else has, and how they are responsible of parnasei, to feed him, the chalkalei, take care of all his needs, the haspikol tzrachov. He doesn't understand. He says the word Abba or the word Ima, but he doesn't understand at all the connotation. What does it mean? What is the significance of this word father and mother? That Korei Abba Bavav. He just calls him Abba. And not only calls him, we know that a child gets very attached to their father and their mother. They're holding on tight. Somebody else walks into the room and wants to take the baby, they start screaming. No, they're only holding on to their mother or their father, which basically means that there's an attachment there and there's a recognition there, but they don't really understand what they're recognizing. The true understanding and the true significance of Abba and Ima is way beyond their understanding. Nevertheless, we still would not say we can't say that this young little child has no recognition. He does recognize Bakara Gemura. He wouldn't go to others. He knows this is the father, this is the mother, and we see that they're so attached to them, they won't let them leave the house, or they won't go to someone else because there's an attachment there. That means the true understanding of what it really means to have a father and a mother. It's as if it's contracted and it's reduced into that little bit of understanding that he has. In other words, what he's saying is that, let me see one more line. When they call out and say Abba ve'Ima, yesh behelim kol inyanu amiti eichshu ovid. In other words, when a child screams out Abba ve'Ima, consciously they don't understand the meaning of it. They don't understand the significance of it. But in that outcry of Abba ve'Ima, calling to Abba and Ima, in it is all the depth and all the meaning of what Abba and Ima is all about. I use an interesting mashal. We'll have to go into it more tomorrow. I use a mashal like when you learn something in halacha, you learn a mishnah. What you're learning is 3-4 lines about what you're supposed to do on Shabbos, what you could do, what you can do. The Gemara, which explains the mishnah, can elaborate on it for pages and pages and pages. This rabbi says one thing, the other rabbi says no, differently. Then they argue about it. They have a dialogue. They debate the issue. Each one brings proof to their point. And then finally you get to the conclusion. And the Gemara has mefarshim, has commentary on the Gemara. He means this. The other one says, no, he meant that. And you have commentary on the commentary. So whatever you have in a Mishnah, which could be 3 or 4 lines of a certain halachic ruling, can have hundreds of pages of commentary, explanations, elaboration, and so on and so forth. But it's all invested in that line. It all comes out of that line. So in a certain sense, he's saying like when a child says, Abba ve'ima, they have no understanding of what they're saying. They're just saying the words and there's a certain connection. But in that connection, like a capsule, in it is all the depth and all the meaning of what Abba and Ima is really all about. This is all the mashal, which you're soon going to draw a parallel between this and Matzah. To be continued. Tomorrow in Yitz Hashem. We'll take a 5-minute break for the next class. Next class will be Mashiach and Gula. Yes. Yesh b'fnei atzman means yesh on its own right. Does anyone want to do me a little favor and just ask Mrs. Yaffe, maybe she'll be up here, but just to print another 2 copies of this. Thank you.
One's also weird if you have to mark it all. Just do
Of course, that's fine. This is free as when, but you know, when.
Thank
Okay, thank you. The walls are talking. What is going on here? Mashiach exciting. Now the Gemara says when Mashiach will come, if somebody will walk over to a tree and try to take a fruit that doesn't belong to him, the tree will talk and say, "Put that down. Don't take it." It's already happening, right?